when you look at geopolitics brought in by, or the disruption in geopolitics brought in by President Trump, just in 2 months that he's been in office in White House, he has said that the old guarantees, security guarantees to Europe may not be continuing or may not be in the same form. In that context, you spoke about rules-based order that EU is, very insistent upon, like India is. Where do you see the current state of affairs as far as Europe is concerned? We'll talk about that first and then come to the bilaterals.
Thanks. I think first what we see in the world has been a bit of a slow onset and now picking up.
Right.
So people sort of trying to gaze at the horizon, what is coming up. But what we see emerging is really a world in deep transformation, in transition, transformation, geopolitical transformation, technological transformation, societal transformation.
Yes.
And all these come at once, some with sort of a longer swell, some's coming more abruptly. But it's all converged towards a new world organization, and no one knows exactly where is the landing spot.
True.
But the question is, what do we want? Do we want a multipolar world, which will be, you want a cooperative version of it, a transactional version of it, or a confrontational version of it? Sure. And you may have the three at the same time as well.
Oh, yes.
So I think in that context, you need to be clear about who you are, what your interests are, and what do you want, and how you engage with the other partners.
True.
I think for the EU, over the past years, clearly the sense of increasing our resilience to shocks, external shocks, has been very much on our radar. It started with, I would say, our economic resilience to shocks, because we discovered through the crisis, through the way economy can be weaponized, our dependency on certain key supply chains, but also on medication, for example, during the COVID.
Sure.
So I think this exercise has been ongoing for Europe for some time about how we increase our economic resilience and economic security.
Right.
It's even in the portfolio of one commissioner, economic security. And on this, we have a whole set of activities that have been developed and policies that help us to withstand the shocks that we receive. The second is the geopolitical shocks that are very much coming up. And here it was more sudden than slow onset, although you can argue whether we should not have seen it coming.
Yeah.
And I think here basically it has a date. It was the 24th February 2022
Sure.
with the unprovoked aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And let's make no mistake, this is not just an assault on a country. It's an assault on the security of the European security order, but it's an assault on the whole world.
Sure.
Fundamental principle of the UN Charter.
Right.
We approach that from a sort of a brutal wake-up call on how we need indeed to increase our security. So what we've seen, as late as last week, we had the EU Commission presenting a new package called ReArm,
Right.
which looks at rearmament, military equipment for the EU, but it's just what I would call a rearmament, which is not just military equipment. It's a geopolitical rearmament and it's a societal rearmament. Yes. How we gear up to this new reality. You know, we always tended to portray the EU as a good, important economic player, but irrelevant.
No military muscle.
No military muscles, irrelevant geopolitical player.
Right.
I think, in a way, the fact that Russia is so much focused on us, that China is so much focused on us, and even US are so much focused on us, we should take it as a token,
as a compliment,
that the fact that we mean something.
Right.
And I think this is the story of what we've seen emerging, that there is a strategic surge of the EU of the past year at play, and people may not have seen it, but when you look from where the EU was even 5 years ago and where it is, there is a sea change. Right. And so we are now representing a collective force which we more articulate, We have our own issues and process internal to the EU, but it's normal. We are not a unitary state.
Right.
But everything we do is based on consensus and will. This is something that we club together, or we pool our sovereignties to do something greater that for everything. So this is really at play. And this, on the security front, this is clearly now, we are full on.
Right.
But let's be clear, this is a defensive posture.
Right.
This is not an aggressive posture.
Good.
We are still a peace and security project. This is what was written in a way in our fundamental charter, our EU treaties, but we cannot let anyone threaten our security interests, threaten our societies.
Allow it to be threatened, yes.
Yeah, because it's surreptitious, it's interference in our election, it's cyber attacks, and it can be potentially a direct over-threshold attack.
Right.
So we have the full gamut
Yes.
of threats and risk, and that was the let's say very much this thinking behind the adoption of the strategic compass, which happened to be adopted a few weeks before the launch of the Russia aggression.
Yes.
So it's not as if we've been
So you were not caught by surprise. You were already preparing for it.
Exactly. This thinking was already very much there.
Right.
It's then simply that the Russian invasion accelerated the pace of the
Right.
event and development.